Hi guys, today is first of a multi-part series on property negotiation. There is a common misconception that property negotiation is just simply the backwards and forwards on an offer. This is incorrect. Property negotiation, in my experience on working on deals for over a decade, is actually a 4-stage process. There is discovery, or stage 1 of negotiation, followed by the actual formal or written offer stage, which leads on to the active negotiation. This is ultimately the backwards and forwards. And finally, there's a late stage or ending stage negotiation. Now, the quickest and easiest money that you will ever make in any property transaction whatsoever is upfront in negotiation, and that's why negotiation is so crucial. When working as a buyer's agent, I get asked a whole range of questions on property, but the 4 most common questions which I get asked can actually be answered in the discovery stage of negotiation. These questions include: the asking price is X, should I go in at Y? Or how much under the asking price can I put my offer in at? The second question is: the agent's told me there's another offer, is this legitimate? The third question is what is the best possible price which I can buy this property for? And the final question is, look, I absolutely love it, I don't care what I pay, I just want to get this property. To start, I have to tell you guys a story about a property transaction which I was involved in. The property ended up selling for $8 million, but the nearest underbidder on that asset was only $6 million, meaning that the person who bought the property actually paid $2 million more than all the other offers. Now, I don't profuse to know if the person that paid $8 million got $8 million of value out of it, because ultimately they're the ones which dictate value. But if it was me, I would much rather save $1.5 million, pay 500 grand more than all the other offers, and still end up with this property. Now, there is no guarantee that this would happen, but in the discovery stage of negotiation, you should answer a lot of these questions. Without further ado, I want to get into stage 1, discovery of negotiation. Starting from the most important thing, you need to forget about price, you need to forget about numbers. Every good negotiator in the world will tell you that any price, any digit, any cent, any dollar that's put on a piece of paper needs to be torn up and thrown away. To hammer this point home further, there are at least 4 prices in any property transaction. There might be 5, there might be 10, but let's just say for this example, there is 4. There is the advertised price. There is the maximum price that you are willing or you are able to pay for the property. There is the bottom dollar, or the minimum price the willing seller is able to sell the property for. And there is ultimately the highest price which a third party is willing to pay for the property. So there is 4 prices. A great example about how flippant numbers are is on a property transaction I was negotiating about 6 months ago. We'd come to a stalemate, the sellers were at one price and we were at another. And what I thought I was going to do was get a bank valuer to come out, value the property, and then we were going to present this to the seller. Our valuation came back at $3.6 million. And the funny thing is the sellers for their mortgage had got their bank's valuer to go out and value the property. Now, it was arguable that the market we were buying in was better, so our valuation should have come in higher. Their valuation was $4.6 million. Our valuation was 3.6, meaning there was $1.2 million or 25 to 30% difference in the property's valuation from 2 different valuers. Now that I've talked enough about price, let's get on to what is the important nitty-gritty, and that is value. There are 2 types of value in any property transaction. There is internal value. Now, this is the only thing which you can directly impact. This is the perceived value that you think that property is worth. And then there is the external value. Now, this can't be directly impacted or changed by you, but you can use things like negotiation to influence it. Now, external value is what third parties think the property is worth. This might be the seller, or this might be the other bidders on the property. Let's get into internal value in the discovery phase of negotiation and talk about my tips of the things you need to do up front in order to work out what that property is worth to you. Rule number 1, and probably the most important rule on establishing internal value, is: should I walk away? Always, the first answer to anything in any negotiation is, should I walk away? You should never feel pressured into transacting on a deal or feel cornered that you need to proceed with any property purchase. There are no ifs and buts to this rule. Regardless, you should be the least motivated in any property transaction. The seller wants your money. It's simple. They wouldn't have paid for the advertising, they wouldn't have put it on realestate.com if they didn't want your money. So you should always feel like you can walk away in any deal. Now, different from rule number one, step number one is you need to work out what your buyer persona is. What is that? What is a buyer persona? Well, a buyer persona is ultimately really the reason why you are buying that property. Are you buying it as a home? Are you buying it as an investment? You need to identify the purpose and why you're actually entering into this property transaction. If you are a home buyer, admit it. Say to yourself, I'm going to act emotionally in some of the decisions I'm going to make on this property within reason. But if your buyer persona is an investor and you start to get emotionally attached based on your buyer persona and it's not congruent with why you entered this transaction up front, you need to take a breath and you need to take a step back and you need to reassess why you're going into this property transaction. It has to stay for the same reason the whole way through the deal. I see all too frequently someone wanting to buy an investment property but then emotionally getting involved with the type of property which they want to buy. Or on the flip side, I see people who want to buy a home, but then they're trying to do the numbers and get it for the best possible price. They end up getting frustrated and they just buy anything because it gets all too hard. Common buyer personas include things like, you might be trading up into a school zone, or you might be buying your first home, which you want to live in for a period. You might be an investor, you might be a developer, you might be a value buyer. There's a whole range of buyer personas, but you just need to work out what yours is. Because the next step in the process is to work out your buying traits or your buying characteristics from your buyer persona. Now, what is a buyer characteristic? Well, this is something that makes you and your offer unique versus all the other buyers in the marketplace. And I'll get into why this is important in a minute. To run through an example, if you're a first home buyer and the characteristic of why you're buying the house is you want to love it or you want to like the location, that is your buyer characteristic of being a home buyer. If you're an investor, you might want to be logical, do the numbers because your persona is an investor. The buyer persona and the characteristics will help you create a personal pitch. What is a personal pitch? Well, ultimately, this is a point of leverage that you are going to convey to the selling agent or ultimately the seller, which allows them to get emotionally invested in your offer or prefer your offer over other offers which are on the table. In some examples on property negotiations, I have seen people get so emotionally attached to who the buyer is going to be that they end up going for a lower priced offer provided that their house was going to get looked after. How do you craft a personal pitch? Well, it does not matter what you're buying the property for, like your characteristic. It is what matters to the seller. There is a structure I use. I ask two questions to all your characteristics in the perspective of the seller. That is, so what and so that. I'll run through some examples. I'm a first home buyer and one of my buyer characteristics is I want to grow up in a house my family loves. So what does that mean to the seller? Well, more than likely their house is a family home too and they have had kids too. So that you can bring up your kids in the house that's a great family house just like they have. Now ultimately, they're not caring about your kids, they're caring about all the memories of their house. And you're going to look after the house in a way that they have. So if there's two offers side by side and one is for the same price as yours, they're more than likely going to pick the buyer who has the personal pitch that they're going to bring their kids up just like they have. Creating these warm and fuzzy narratives is easy for a first home buyer, but what about an investor? Well, you need to start thinking about your characteristics and what sets you apart from all the other buyers and why that would matter to the seller. Now, I'm an investor. One of my buyer characteristics is that I do my numbers and I only buy if I can see value in a property. So what does that matter to the seller? Well, ultimately, you've done your numbers well, you've probably got budgets, you've probably gone to the bank, and that means your offer is rock solid. So that if they accept your offer, you are more than likely going to be the most likely buyer in the market that will complete the deal. That ultimately matters to the seller because if they've got two offers and one's shaky and one's rock solid, they're more than likely going to go through the rock solid one. Step number 2 is all about knowing your outs, which is actually a bit different to rule number 1. Rule number 1 is you can always walk away. Step number 2 is to actively go out and find plan Bs, other properties, other opportunities or other ways outside of just buying this house that you would still feel comfortable. The first step is quite simple. Have a shortlist. Have a range of different properties that you want to look at. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go to your plan Bs, but ultimately, if you put an offer on a property and it's going to be above your budget, it doesn't matter how well you negotiate, you're going to have to go to your plan B anyway. This is easy as an investor because you might have 5 different properties, but as a first home buyer, this is hard. Well, you have to think about all your deadlines as a first home buyer, all the things that are going to make you emotionally want to do a deal quicker. For example, if you have a lease coming to an end, get another 2 months extension, push it out, give yourself more time to look at more properties. Effectively, you want to be slowing down your decision-making process. You want to be pushing back any reasons why you have to do a deal, because this means that other opportunities which might be better than this current one pop up, or ultimately, if this one doesn't work out, you're not going to go and try and break the bank just to make the deal work. Step number 3 is to know your negs. And what does that mean? Well, know all the negatives about the property, know negatives about the street, know negatives about the suburb. And I mean everything. You need to go through everything in a fine-tooth comb. I want you to physically write out all of the reasons why this property is no good for you. There are actually a couple of useful reasons for doing this. The first one is, if you know a lot of negatives, it might highlight a plan B that suits you better, or it might just reduce the difference between your plan A and your plan B in terms of where you perceive value. The second thing is by highlighting all of the negatives, it reduces your own internal value of that property down, so you're not as emotionally invested. And the third item is that it allows you to identify a list of things that you might use in negotiation to leverage a lower price. Coming back to internal value and external value, it's important that you put the hat on of external buyers when you're thinking about the negatives. So think about all the other buyers in the marketplace that come through the home open and think about all the things which they might find as negative. You might not care if the backyard is small, but you could certainly use that when you're comparing it against other properties and what they've sold for in order to leverage a lower purchase price. A good little tip here is walk around the home open and just listen to what other buyers are saying. They'll often talk to each other and tell each other what they don't and do like about the property. Also, you need to get out and have a look at a range of other properties, because if you haven't seen other properties, you don't know what the negatives in that area could be. Step number 4 is to know the property's history. I'll get into what types of questions you want answered and also some tools to do that. The first one is RP data, which can be quite costly, but sometimes your mortgage broker has access. The second tool is Google, which is free. The way I like to Google a property's address is simply 123 Fake Street in the suburb, or asking the agent for a copy of the title, which will have the lot number. So I would go lot 2 on Fake Street, suburb. The reason being is sometimes in council records, the lot number shows up on Google history more than the address does. Now, I'm going to go through some of the questions which you want answered and how you interpret it. The first one is, how long has the property been on the market? You can ask the agent, but I always like to get a third-party check from Google or from RP data. And you want to know, is it a week or is it 3 months? Because this gives you an idea of how long or how stale that listing is. The second is, has it been listed before and not sold? You know, sometimes a property gets put on the market with one agent, pulled off, put on with another one. You want to look back and see through the history, what was the bottom dollar of the previous agent. For example, sometimes I've seen properties that get sold for more than what they previously were advertised for. This is crazy to me, because often that's a great leverage point when you can say, well, you had it on the market for 500, you've now got it for 550, you would have accepted 500, why don't you accept my offer now? The third question is, has there been any renovations to the property? This tool to use is probably near maps, and you can go back, or even with Google, you can actually go back through timestamps of different dates. Now, external or structural modifications is the ones that you want to see from a bird's eye view. This will allow you to then ask further questions to the agent. Ultimately, all these questions you can go to the agent anyway, but it's best to double check through a third party. The next question is, has the seller's name changed off market? The reason why I want to know this, for example, is sometimes a divorce causes a name change from 2 people to 1 person, or an estate causes a complete name change from 1 person to another, and you can often tell by last names. For example, if a property has recently gone from 2 persons' names to 1 person's name, and it's more than likely a divorce, and then all of a sudden come on the market, it might be that all of a sudden it's settled and they just want to sell it and move on and move forward with their life, so they may be a motivated seller. The next question is has the property been taken over by another agent mid-listing? For example, has it been listed with one agent for 90 days and then gone to agent B? Reason being is often agent A, for example, has taken the seller offers, they haven't accepted them, they believe that agent A is the issue with the property, they've listed it with agent B. Well, all of a sudden agent B has then got the same offers, they might be realising that it's not the agent's fault their property is not selling, it might not be worth what they think it's worth. The next question is, has there been any price reductions? This is easy on RP data. Sometimes there's like a website called oldlistings.com.au, I think, and that gives you some history. It's not perfect. The reason why you look at this is you want to see what the drops are like. Are they small drops? Have they held their price? Have they held the property on the market for a long period of time at the same price and then all of a sudden start to drop? Have the price drops been aggressive? You just want to get a feel. And again, it's all about benchmarking against other listings. So you've got to look at a lot of properties to understand this data. But ultimately, if a seller is constantly reducing their price, they are wanting to sell the property. If a seller's holding their price, they're probably not as motivated. Moving on to step number 5, you need to work out a circuit breaker or a narrative around a circuit breaker. And what do I mean by that? Well, in every negotiation, you kind of want a good guy and a bad guy, but you don't want a good guy and a bad guy. You want a great guy and a good but realistic kind of person. And the reason why I say that is a circuit breaker is a great person to slow down or stop the negotiation or call into question the other party. Now, I use the great and good analogy because you want someone who can build rapport with the agent. Ultimately, the agent has a massive influence on who gets their offer accepted. And the seller doesn't want to deal with an annoying person. And if you are annoying to the agent, they will convey that even inadvertently to the seller, and this might put a bad taste in the seller's mouth. So you want someone who's really chummy with the agent, and you want someone who can call it into question. How do we do this? Well, say you're a couple, you might have a husband and wife team. You want one of those parties to be chummy with the agent and the other one not so much. Now, the agent is going to try and get both decision makers in the room, but when there are pivot points which are important inflection points in negotiation taking place, you want to try and remove the bad guy or the good guy out of the room and just keep the great person there. The reason for this is they are the ones that can call the shots while still maintaining rapport. If you don't like the price that the sellers come back in terms of negotiation, you don't want to say, I don't like the price and walk out. You want to say, look, let me have a chat with my husband or wife, get back to you, and then you call them up on the phone, walk outside and say, look, I would like to pay more. I would like to pay more for this house because I really, really like it, but my wife or husband's not comfortable. They know the books, so I have to trust them. You don't look like a bad guy. They don't look that bad, and they're removed that the agent can't leverage the fact that they are there. If you're an investor, you might say you have a money partner or a business partner. If you're a first home buyer, you might say it's your parents, or your dad or your mum, which is going to lend you money. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, but as long as you stick consistent with that narrative and you remove that circuit breaker out of pivot points in the negotiation, this will give you strong power to maintain rapport with the selling agent, but also be able to call into question when you think that you should be pushing back on some terms of the negotiation. Step number 6 is get your finances done. Go to your bank, go to your broker, do your budgets, get your pre-approval, get it on a letterhead, whether it's from your bank or from the broker saying that they've looked into your financial circumstances and it's likely that you will be able to get a loan, provided that they say you can do that. And the reason for this is you will use this as a positive leverage point when submitting an offer. You're pre-approved. Another quick but obvious tip to this is if you have a pre-approval letter with an amount that you're pre-approved to, remove that off the letter before you submit it, because if you've put your offer in at $750 and you've also submitted a pre-approval letter with a budget up to $800, the seller will ask, why can't you just increase your offer to $800? It removes your leverage. Unless, of course, your pre-approval letter is for the exact same amount your max bid on your offer is, then it creates a strong leverage point. I'm pre-approved X, my offer is in at X. I'm going to talk about formal contracts in the next video, but it's worthwhile chatting to your broker about how long the bank's turnaround time is from pre-approval to formal approval. Generally, 5 to 10 business days is pretty short. I've seen some deals get done like that if everything's ready. The common market perception is 15 to 20 business days from a seller, and anything over 20 business days is probably too long, and you want to speak to your broker about reducing that time down. Ideally, when you submit the offer, you want as few days within reason that you can actually get the deal done to make your offer appear strong.